All right, so I want to talk about the defunding of PBS and likely NPR because it's been a hot topic, um, for the past as of recent days and whatnot. And there's a lot of people. On social media, a lot of people, especially if they happen to be on the left, they've literally been let's just say they've really been up in arms, and their you-know-what have been, they've been flipping their you-know-what. And let me just say this right here. I myself used to grow up watching PBS. Literally a lot of the children's programming on PBS and whatnot, because, that it wasn't because I didn't have cable. It wasn't because I didn't have cable at the time, which a lot of people were saying that they couldn't afford cable. I couldn't. My folks couldn't afford cable, and even then, it was like, the majority of the time, I would usually do, everything else instead of like being around the TV all day. When I was a kid growing up, I used to like drawing. And I used to like, I was like reading a lot of books back in the day. Which, by the way, when Reading Rainbow was on PBS, which, by the way, was hosted by LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton, who portrayed as Geordi LaForge from Star Trek TNG. Yeah, that LeVar Burton. I would think that was one of the shows that literally got me into reading growing up, and I loved it all the time. It was pretty cool. But that's not what I'm going to bring up here, because what I'm really going to bring up here is, the real reason why PBS and NPR have been defunded. I will say this: it's literally a good thing that they have been defunded, because in recent history, even before, excuse me, literally before Donald Trump became president in his first term, there's been some real issues with PBS when they decide to get funded by the federal government, even though they've been funded by the federal government for quite a long time. And even then, and since their funding, they have been showing their blatant left-wing bias. Yeah, they've been showing their blatant left-wing bias, but the bias was really strong during the days of Barack Hussein O. And of course, they've been showing their bias when, during Donald Trump's first term. It's literally the channel, the organization, as I call it, has become a major supporter of left-wing causes, despite them claiming that, you know, they don't have partiality to any political party. You know, apparently that right, apparently what they say right there, that was a lie. So, I mean, basically, most intellectual individuals, myself included, will see that, will see that they have literally lied to themselves on that behalf. And, they literally, when Trump became president the second time, like right now, it was, I, I would think they literally had it coming. And the real reason being is because, yeah, since the federal government, you know, had their support, they've been pushing nothing more than just tons of leftist propaganda, even in their children's programming. Notice, back in 2020, during the height of the pandemic, of the COOF pandemic, I did a video talking about. Matter of fact, I did a couple of videos that was talking about PBS. The first one was talking about when they aired Arthur. There was an episode of Arthur, with, during the time when Ratburn and his lover was getting married. Now, me particularly, I never knew Ratburn was a homosexual until that episode aired. Now, I personally did not see that episode of Arthur, and to tell the honest to God truth, I couldn't care less about it, because it makes me want to ask the question, why in the world would subject matter like that be shown to children in the first place? And yeah, especially when Arthur and the gang were attendees of Ratburn and his male lover's wedding. Yeah, if I had kids right now, and if we were to, and if they were to see that, I'd be furious. I'd be really furious on that. PBS also showed about, there was another Arthur episode where they were talking about George Floyd. George Floyd, who was a fentanyl addict, and basically they were talking about police brutality and whatnot, amongst a certain group of people, like, because people that look like me, obviously. But the truth is, but they distorted that truth too, because we all know, well, if you're an intellectual individual, they should know that George Floyd was a criminal. Was literally a career criminal, which unfortunately for him, he brought himself to his own demise. That's not a lie right there. The facts don't lie. So on that episode, you had Mrs. McGrady, talking to Arthur and Buster, literally about this whole nonsense of systemic racism. Trying to pick, which, by the way, they parodied off of Barack Hussein. And then, there was a time they was going to do a remake of Clifford, the Big Red Dog, where there was going to be a show that's talking about how one of the main characters, Emily Elizabeth, living living with two mothers. They're trying to change. They were trying to change the story around. So, to tell the honest to God truth, PBS had it coming. I mean, was it really necessary for PBS kids to show stuff like that? You ask me. Oh yeah, let's not even bring up what they really show on PBS NewsHour, because if you really think about it, PBS NewsHour has always showed their left wing bias. They are really no different from the other alphabet networks. Always broadcasting crap, nothing but crap. Cloud News Network, MSNBC, you name it. Even the Washington Compost. But at the same time, I digress. And usually, and with NPR, they usually have it makes me beg to ask this. Since PBS and NPR have been dabbling into the political arena, apparently they were thinking that because they want to dabble into politics, they want to feel that left-wing politics. If you have a left-wing slant, they believe that they literally have been following what other left-wing outlets have been doing. They haven't cared about truth, unless if it applies to them. And even then, if they were to try to, if they were to try to think that, I myself, if they were to try to think that voting a specific way, particularly voting Republican, is like, a racist thing. Just like how the left always want to make that claim. Apparently, they're pushing ignorance, and we all know ignorance is bliss. This is what I believe. This is why I would say PBS and NPR should have remained apolitical to begin with. Now, I will say this. Some of you all may bring up Mr. Rogers. Well, to tell the honest to God truth, and believe it or not, Fred Rogers was a registered Republican. That's a fact right there. You can look it up for yourself. And he literally advocated for public broadcasting in the past. However, he was literally nothing more than just a man of morals and high standards. If he was alive today, he would look down on what the heck is going on with the current state of public broadcasting. Why has it shifted their ways to things like progressivism, and and even to the point where you know, PBS Kids programming have been pushing nonsensical, things like nonsensical terms like systemic racism or, this pronoun crap. I mean, isn't it enough that we got drag queen story hour crap uh, into our schools and public libraries, and people are fed up with it. I'm sure fed up with it. And speaking of Mr. Rogers, some of y'all may assume that I would have not watched the episode where Officer Clemens, a black man, by the way, was with Mr. Rogers at the time. Now, here's the thing. Fred Rogers himself didn't see race. He saw character, within people. He just like me feels that skin color doesn't mean a thing. I mean, it only means to those who really felt like that's their main subject, because the only thing they care about is skin color, trying to. I mean, that's literally the only thing they idolize. I mean, point blank, not gonna lie. But Fred Rogers wasn't about that. Fred Rogers was about, was promoting self-care, bettering up your character and things like that. And you know what? I used to love watching Mr. Rogers growing up. I mean, and even its animated sequel series, Daniel Tiger, which came out in 2012. Which, by the way, it was done by the same production company as that Mr. Rogers was when Mr. Rogers was done. But it's like this: if public broadcasting supposed to be an educational tool for individuals, especially if they happen to be of, especially if it's, catered towards children and whatnot, then let them teach moral values. Let them learn how to, give them some real educational stuff, not this progressive garbage. And that's literally why public at, PBS and NPR have had government funding cut from them. Now, you may also go on the record and say that a lot of underwriters come from its viewers. I'm sorry to say it, but that's not even true. I mean, and if you really think about it, because of the defunding, it's not really going to affect, big markets like Pittsburgh, Boston, and Chicago, WQED, WGBH, and WTTW, respectively. It may heavily affect smaller markets, so to speak. And that's literally what I have to say about why, pretty much all of my reasons why public broadcasting has been defunded. Now, what are your thoughts? This is all I got to say. What are your thoughts? What are your comments on this? I'm Chuck Johnson, a.k.a. Kid Thunder. I'm signing off.